Hey guys, I just want to let you know we charge a standard fee here for all the reviews we do. It helps us keep the site going, but I want to be honest with you. These aren't meant to be endorsements. Let's get into it. Hey guys, it's one of my first times up in Park City. You can see some of the Olympic jumps way off in the distance and just this awesome little trail. It's just beautiful. I'm hanging out with Chris Head, who's, what are you, the territory manager for Magnum, or the?
I'm a sales manager for the southern United States from California to North Carolina.
Wonderful. We've been friends for a while, and he took me to this special spot here, and he's actually on the Peak 29, which has slightly larger wheel diameter, and this one has hydraulic disc brakes and kind of a fancier display. But right over here, we've got the Mi6, M maybe standing for mountain. It's a hardtail cross-country type electric bike with, I'm kind of trying to figure out the exact travel on the fork. You know, it's about 100 millimeters from here to here, but it doesn't always travel the full length. So I was estimating 80. This suspension fork is going to give you a little bit of cushion on trails like this. There's nothing too extreme. We're not going over huge drops. That head tube angle isn't raked really far out. So this is exactly the kind of space where you'd want to use a bike like this. We've got some nice tread, 27.5 inch by 2.25. So these are a little bit fatter, just a nice size. Actually, you know, between 26 and then 29, having something that's right in the middle, it's going to give you a lower attack angle, a little bit more volume, but it's going to be a little bit more nimble than a 29er. So this is kind of a great size for me. I'm about 5'9", and just looking at the standover height and the reach and stuff, this bike to me feels like a really solid medium. It doesn't come in any other frame sizes. There's a little bit of adjustability you can do with these spacers. You can add or remove spacers, get like a longer stem, or maybe even flip this stem down if you wanted to get more aggressive. Locking ergonomic grips from Velo. Come back here to a fairly active saddle. This is also a Velo saddle. And then these nice oversized Welgo aluminum alloy platform pedals, Shimano crank arm, and 3 chain rings up front. So 48, 38, 28 right there. Kind of a basic Shimano derailleur up front. In the rear, we have Shimano Altus, one step up from the entry-level spec, which is Shimano Tourney, kind of Tourney TX. So for me, that's a nice little upgrade. And the cassette is 7 speeds, so this is 21 speeds altogether, 14 to 28. So the spread isn't really that wide. More and more electric bikes are going to like a 1-by instead of a 3-by. This gives you some really nice, comfortable pedal cadence options because you've got 3 chain rings and then the 7 speeds back here. And you can actually still climb fairly effectively, even though 28 tooth compared to 32, 36, or even 42 or 50 with some of the really big, cassette options now. When you combine this drivetrain like this, you get a really big spread. So I do appreciate that. Adds a little bit of weight with that second derailleur up front. And there's just a lot of times I'll kind of like set it and forget it on that middle ring, especially when you've got really powerful planetary geared hub motor. This is DOS kit. 500 watt. It's a 48 volt system, 48 volts, 13 amp hours, 624 watt hours. That's a nice battery. Magnum has another bike. It was the Magnum Mi5, right? So the 6 basically get 48 volts instead of 36 and a 500 watt motor instead of 350. And this peaks out around 700 watts. And they say it's got like 90 newton meters of torque, which is, I could believe that. Like, this is climbing pretty capably, and it's a very zippy system. This is actually categorized as like kind of a speed pedelec because you can go above 20 miles per hour, up to around 25 with pedal assist, and then up to 20 with the trigger throttle. I like how small this is, and I appreciate that it's a trigger and that these are locking grips, because if you're on a bumpy section of trail and maybe you're really maneuvering hard and you squeeze down, you don't want to accidentally add power. So you have to be pretty intentional about this trigger throttle, but it doesn't push the other shifters in too far. And we do have, it's like a 1-way high and then 3-step low here. So it's kind of a rapid fire type of a shifter, a little bit faster. And then we've got the shifters here on the left for that front derailleur. It's a nice setup, and a lot of the components have been shared from their other bikes. They've got a lot of city bikes and kind of commuter class bikes with fenders, with racks and everything. And you can see they've got mounting provisions back here to add this rack. They have kind of a proprietary rack. There's even a hole here and then one up here on the arch of the suspension fork. So you could potentially do some fenders or something if you wanted to. So for me, this could be like kind of a commuting platform. You probably just want to add some lights or something. And as a person with limited space and limited budget, you know, $16.99, not too bad for this bike. And if I lived somewhere like Park City where it snows and where there's trails and you can kind of go in the city and then go across the trail, maybe your commute incorporates both, this would be a perfect bike for that. It's sort of like go anywhere bike, and it's one of the lighter models in the Magnum lineup because it doesn't have the fenders and stuff by default. So it's about 56 pounds. The battery pack, because it's higher capacity, it's about 9.2 pounds, and the motor weighs probably about 10 pounds. So that's a kind of an overview of some of the electronics. I do want to point out this box right here. This is the motor controller, and they've separated it because it makes the batteries a little bit more affordable to replace. These are about $680 if you want to get a replacement, which isn't too bad. A lot of the other batteries I see on the market from some of the big guys like Bosch or Yamaha, Shimano, they cost like $800, $900, sometimes more than that. So, pretty high capacity, pretty good price. Separated controller. It does stand out a little bit visually, and it's right there. It could take some hits from little rocks and mud and stuff. You don't have a fender here, but it is metal, so it feels like it's done pretty well. And it separates heat from the battery pack because these batteries are sensitive to extreme heat. Extreme cold is going to limit your range. Extreme heat is going to take away from how many full charge cycles you get. It's just going to degrade those cells. But they are using higher end, fancier, like Samsung, LG, Panasonic cells, nicer stuff. And this comes with a year-long comprehensive warranty. Magnum works with shops all over the US. And actually, I think they have some shops in Canada, and they've got like New Zealand and Israel. So they're kind of a global company. They've been around for a bunch of years. I've reviewed tons of their bikes, and in a lot of ways they're similar. They're just sort of refinements. And I feel like they're always trying to balance that value and give you the parts you need. So if you got in an accident or something, you could swap out that display. One of the areas that they've gone a little bit cheaper with this bike is with mechanical disc brakes versus hydraulic. So you heard me mention that before when we were on the Peak 29. That's one way they save some money. And we've got a 160 millimeter rotor in the back, 180 up front. A lot of your stopping power is towards the front of the bike, as you probably experience a little bit of dive with this suspension fork too. Your weight shifts forward. So having a bigger rotor up there gives you a better mechanical advantage and some better cooling. It's not the end of the world. I mean, you're not going to go skidding out or something, or rather if you do, you're not going to get good stopping power anyway. So for me, this is a decent setup. There will be some cable stretch over time, and you do have multiple cables because of the two derailleurs, so there might be a little bit more maintenance on this bike, but with a mechanical brake setup, that's maintenance you can do yourself with like an Allen key. We've got a kickstand in the middle, which is not something you see on a lot of like really high-end mountain bikes or electric mountain bikes, just because it can kind of bounce around and rattle. But I actually really like that for that whole commuting scenario we talked about. And you can easily take it off right there. You could remove it. It is positioned in the middle of the frame. It does create pedal lock. That's something I complain about sometimes. I prefer to have like a little tab back here and sort of a rear mounted kickstand, but I guess that's just how this frame was designed. Also, you'll notice the charging port for the battery is right there next to the left crank arm. So if you're plugged in and that crank goes around, you could potentially snag it. So in a way, having it get locked down here might keep you safer in that scenario. And here is the little sealed cadence sensor. It's 12 magnets. It's small. It's compact. It's like pretty water resistant, dust resistant. So I like that. It's very responsive. And being a cadence sensor, it means, as you're pedaling this thing, if you're moving the cranks at all, it responds and the motor kicks on. And it's just based on how high your level of assist is set. It's not really based on how hard you're pedaling, but you do have that variable speed like trigger throttle at any time. It gives you full power, and that's really nice for those moments where you come around a corner and you're not in the right gear and you just need to get a little bit of extra power and climb. But as a class 3 or class 2 electric bike, if you change the top speed here, this isn't allowed on like all the trails. There are a lot of trails that are limited to class 1, which would be pedal assist only. So if you're in an area where there's a lot of enforcement or you're just concerned, you can just like disable that throttle. See, there's a quick disconnect right here. You just take it completely off and make sure the speed is at 20 miles per hour or whatever the regulations are, and this could become a class 1. So it's very versatile, and I think in a lot of cases I like having a throttle, especially if you're in soft stuff and you need some help getting started, or you're commuting and you want to relax a little bit. on the way home. Coming back up front with that suspension fork, we do have preload adjust, but we don't have lockout. This isn't an air fork. These are steel stanchions. It's kind of basic, but we do have quick release up front. In the rear, we've got this nice derailleur guard that protects the derailleur, and we've got like a 12 millimeter bolt, maybe like, oh, actually threaded axle with like a 19 millimeter bolt on this side. So serviceability on this bike, if you got a flat tire in the rear, it's going to be a pain. You're going to have some extra tools, and there's extra wires, but there is a quick disconnect point there, which is pretty nice. We don't have a chain cover or chain guide or anything, but in a way, this derailleur does act as a guide, so you shouldn't have too many drops, at least from the front. And in the rear, you know, at overshift, I haven't experienced that happening. That would be where the chain like derails inward towards the motor, and there's not a huge gap there. So these are like kind of rugged questions that I like to ask myself. Like, is this bike going to actually perform on the trail? You know, the Schwabe tires are pretty nice, Smart Sam performance. You know, that's decent. I wonder if you could go like a little bit higher volume if you wanted to. These are 650B, but in terms of like plus size, it looks like there's a little bit of spacing limitation in the back. So you might be kind of stuck with that 2.25 or maybe 2.4 or something like that. That would be the highest you could go, which would be plus size. And then you might get a little bit of buzzing or something like that. All in all, I think it's a pretty good value. 30.9 millimeter seat post, by the way. If you're someone who really wants to cush that ride a little bit more, you could swap this stationary static seat post with something like a Thudbuster, Body Float, even the sort of the more affordable ones. They have the Pro Max suspension seat posts on a lot of their city bikes, and that's something that I kind of do appreciate. So there's a lot of little upgrades you could do depending on how you plan to use this bike. So I think that's good. Also, the brake levers, 4 fingers. We talked about mechanical brakes. The right one, you have to pull a little bit harder because the cable goes so much further. And over time, it just might need a little bit more attention. There's no motor inhibitor on the right brake lever, but the left one does have it. And that means that if at any point in time you were depressing the throttle or pedal assist was active, you could override it, but you have to use the left brake lever, not the right one. That's another compromise, maybe cost savings. It cuts down on the wires and stuff. And then there's a little bell. It looks like maybe that's really hugged right next to the shifters right now, so it's not ringing perfectly clearly. But otherwise, you know, pretty clear cockpit and maybe like a low rise, almost a flat handlebar. So again, a little bit more aggressive because of what this bike is really intended to do. I want to show you the battery removal while we're at it. So I turn the key, it is spring loaded, and then there's a little latch right here and just kind of pull off. Almost got it, there it is. So you could easily take this off. The reason I'm calling this out and trying to show you is because there are definitely moments where you might have a car rack where you have to hang the bike, and this battery being like semi-integrated, it's sort of half in the frame, half out. There might not be enough room if you leave the battery on. And again, back to the heat sensitivity and the cold sensitivity. So you can take that off, try not to overload your bike racks. It's nice to do that. And they are swappable. So you might have several Magnum bikes that use the same battery, and you could put one in a backpack and get like twice the range or something like that, or borrow one if one is out of commission or being charged. It's kind of neat that their family of bikes do share parts like that. Okay, so I think that's it. Now that the battery's in, I'm going to take the key out so it won't rattle a whole lot. And I want to point out this little power button on top of the battery. You might need to press that occasionally because the battery goes into like a deep sleep mode. Once you do that, we can turn on the display. I'm going to try not to get too much glare for you guys here. It is, see how it swivels a little bit? That's kind of nice when you're riding. Not removable, and there's no USB port or anything on the display itself. 6 little charge level bars, so 6 ticks. That's not too bad. A lot of electric bikes only have 5, so it's a little bit higher resolution. Speed in miles per hour, you can change that to kilometers if you want. It always starts in assist level 1, and that throttle is hot, like in all the levels of assist, even 0. So you could take it down to 0, and then it's almost like a scooter. But I like that the display lets you go all the way around. So I click down one more time and it would take me to 6. This one isn't doing it. It's so funny. Some of their bikes do and some don't. So if I go up to 6 and then I press it one more time, so it loops upward, but it doesn't loop downward, at least the way it's set up right now. So for a trail like this, I've been keeping it at the lower levels of assist and then just using the throttle as a little bit of extra help if we're in a steep section or if I want to catch up with that guy for any reason. And then down here, we've got like trip distance, trip time. And I think there's odometer, max speed as well. Some good readouts. Holding the minus key would give us a walk mode, which I'm going to activate right now so I can pedal this crank forward a little bit and remove that pedal lock situation we talked about. Holding plus will give us some backlighting on that display. And that's kind of nice if it's dark out and you just want to be able to read this a little bit more clearly. Holding press plus and minus for a few seconds gets you into the menu system. And there is like a password on there, but once you're in the menu, maybe get your shop to help you out with that, you can adjust down the top speed if you want to, and it's sort of stepped. So, you know, it goes from like 25, I think it says 28, but you know, 25 is what you really get, down to like 20, down to 15.5, and then 6 or something like that. So it's sort of stepped, but that's a nice option. You could extend your range a little bit, or if you bought this for a younger person, you felt like you wanted to limit their speed for safety or something, you could do that. Change the kilometers to miles per hour, adjust the wheel size settings, the voltage, but you really wouldn't want to change too many of those things because they are set up specifically for this bike. I want to call out that not all the cables here are internally routed, but some of them are, and it's a pretty clean look. This only comes in black. Seems like a lot of their mountain products are that way, but some of their city bikes also come in white, which is nice. And just the fact that it matches the suspension fork and stuff, it's a pretty decent setup. I think with that said, you know, and the nice little windows up here and everything, with that said, we might keep riding on this trail. There we go. It's always a challenge getting started with one-handed. What a great trail. Such a cool view. We are climbing here. Definitely not possible if I wasn't getting some motor assist here, especially since I've only got one hand on the bars. Oh boy, here we go. Okay guys, from here you can see that triple chainring we talked about, 48, 38, 28 tooth, and the smallest 28 tooth on the front is going to be the best for climbing, whereas the largest on the rear, 28, is going to be the best for climbing. So if you pair those two, you're just going to, and I might even do that starting out, take it all the way down to 0 assist, and pedal without any motor, and just kind of show you what it's like. Again, Shimano Altus and this setup, it's a bit different than like a one by, but it's fairly effective, and this is a fun bike to ride. You can see there's a slap guard there, kind of a sticker, kind of Kevlar looking thing. It's pretty good look overall. I like this bike. It's been fun to ride. I'm a little bit more used to like a full suspension plus size tire thing, maybe you know, kind of an all mountain experience. So this cross country is a bit more efficient, definitely more affordable, and I just love the versatility. You could be using this around the city too. So here we go. I'm going to shift the gears. So there we go. That was my climbing setup. Now I'm going to turn on assist after I get into a more natural, comfortable mid-speed sort of gearing. Yeah, I mean, even 10 miles per hour on a trail like this feels fast because there's a lot of turns and rocks and things to navigate around. So I was in assist level 3 there. You definitely wouldn't want to be in 6, or I'd start to feel out of control with the dusty trail. This time I'm going to turn the camera the other direction so you can see the suspension fork and just a little bit of where we're headed. I'm going to use the throttle to get started since it's an incline. Nice. I'm gonna juice it with the throttle now. There we go. I think it's just a little bit too sketchy to try to film and ride on this section, but you get the idea. And really, that's, I think, one of the reasons why throttles on a lot of bike paths and stuff, you want to be careful, and they, frankly, they aren't allowed on a lot of locations. Chris might be doing the walk mode thing there. That's pretty cool. You guys, thanks for hanging out. I hope this helps you out and gives you some idea of what this bike offers, and then also what's on offer in the Magnum lineup. For the full review with all the specs and stuff and some comparison tools so you could look at these two bikes back to back, I'll see you at ElectricBikeReview.com. Have fun out there, ride safe, follow the rules. Love you guys. We'll see you next time.